Hello, welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Raja Saroj Sahib and these are the headlines. The United Nations is seeking to raise more than $600 million in aid for Afghanistan at a conference in Geneva later today. It warned that Afghans are facing a major humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, a Pakistan International Airlines plane carrying a handful of passengers landed in Kabul. It's the first international commercial flight to Afghanistan since the Taliban took power in August. Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Rajouri district. The youth was targeted during a so-called search operation in Manjakot area of the district. This comes a day after Islamabad released a dossier exposing the scale of Indian war crimes in the territory. Israel has launched multiple airstrikes on the Gaza Strip for the third night in a row. The occupation regime says it pounded the besieged strip in response to alleged rocket strikes from the besieged enclave. However, the Palestinian resistance group Hamas accused Israeli government of escalating the situation to evade its internal crisis. North Korea says it has carried out a series of successful tests of a new long-range cruise missile over the weekend. The country's state media said the missiles under development for 2 years successfully hit targets 1,500 kilometers away. Responding, the US said the tests show Pyongyang's focus on developing military program that threaten its neighbors and international community. In cricket, former Pakistan captain Ramiz Raja has been elected unopposed as the 36th chairman of the Pakistan Cricket Board. The board's top post fell vacant after Ehsan Mani stepped down after completing his 3-year term last month. That's all with the headlines. We'll be right back after a short break with the details. Welcome back. The United Nations is seeking to raise more than $600 million in aid for Afghanistan at a conference in Geneva later today. In a statement, it warned that Afghans are facing a major humanitarian crisis. It said the country faces an extremely dire situation, is confronted with protracted conflict, severe drought and the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, a Pakistan International Airline plane carrying a handful of passengers landed in Kabul. It's the first international commercial flight to Afghanistan since the Taliban took power in August. The PIA is one of the only services which operated evacuation flights from Kabul after the US Kuwait withdrawal. Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Rajouri district. The youth was targeted during a so-called search operation in Manjakot area of the district. The occupying forces has launched search operation in parts of Thana Mandi. The operation was still going on when last reports were received. It comes a day after Islamabad released a dossier exposing the scale of the Indian war crime in the territory. In the past 6 months, the occupying forces conducted over 15,500 so-called search operations. Rights groups say the Indian forces have martyred over 400 Kashmiris since the region lost its autonomy in August 2019. Israel has launched multiple airstrikes on the Gaza Strip for the third night in a row. The occupation regime says it pounded the besieged strip in response to the alleged rocket strikes from the besieged enclave.
Israeli regime continues to violate the ceasefire deal with the Hamas group that was reached in May. threatening the lives of innocent Palestinians. Palestinian media has quoted locals as saying that in the latest air raids, Israeli army launched 7 missiles at 3 different sites in Gaza. It said the strikes damaged civilian infrastructure in several parts of Beit Lahia, Rafah and Khan Yunis cities. Earlier, the Palestinian resistance group Hamas accused the Israeli government of escalating the situation to evade its internal crisis. The atrocities of the occupation regime continues in West Bank as well. The Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron city has been closed to the Muslims worshippers due to Jewish holidays. The occupation troops have also stormed the city's Bab al-Zahiyeh area and fired tear gas and stun grenades at residents, forcing the shutdown of local businesses.
It's time for a short break. We'll be right back with more details in just a bit. Welcome back. North Korea says it has carried out a series of successful tests of a new long-range cruise missile over the weekend. The country's state media said the missiles, under development for 2 years, successfully hit targets 1,500 kilometers away. Pyongyang hailed the missile as a strategic weapon of great significance that meets Kim Jong-un's call to strengthen country's military might. The U.S. said the tests show Pyongyang's focus on developing military program that threaten its neighbors and international community. In a statement, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command said Washington's commitment to defending allies South Korea and Japan remains ironclad. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff also said that an in-depth analysis is underway in close cooperation with U.S. intelligence on the development. For more on this, we have with us Fahad Masood, international security analyst from Islamabad. Masood, thank you for joining us. How does North Korea's new long-range cruise missile is different from its previous ones?
Well, as they have gone through the process, previously it was all to do with ballistic missiles. This is the first cruise missile that they've launched. It's a terrain-hugging, low-altitude, subsonic weapon system which is utilized to fly under the radar. The range, as explained or depicted by the government, is 1,500 kilometers, approximately 930 miles, which is decently long considering the peripheries of North Korea. South Korea being primary, and other than that, obviously, the American presence in Taiwan. So that comes well within range. The important aspect is, once again, the United Nations Security Council resolutions do not talk about the cruise missile program. They do have countered the ballistic missiles, but not the cruise missiles.
Right. So the temperature on the Korean Peninsula is once again rising. What does this signify, and should the world be getting worried?
Well, worried may not be the word. Concerned, yes, because considering where we stand today, the next probable possible conflict or flashpoint can be the Asian pivot. Maybe the Taiwan Strait, may it be the North Korean push towards weaponization or nuclearization, for that matter. Under the present regime of Biden, United States has come up with this PACOM, which is the Indo-Pacific Command, relating to this region, where they make India as a part of their Pacific Command. So they're trying to negate China, as we call it, in the South China Sea, and instead of letting it become a global superpower, keep it to the regional superpower domain. So that is where flashpoints can occur, probability more than possibility.
Right. Fahad, now South Korea has said that Washington is committed to the dialogue process, but at the same time, Seoul and Washington conduct provocative military drills. How would you characterize this double-headed policy?
This process of communication stalled out in 2018, 2019. They're still trying to get back on track, but with Biden in place or in the seat, I think this will happen sooner than later, because the Democrats believe in communication, in getting together with a globalized world. So long story short, these provocative timelines may not be a huge issue if sanity prevails and the understanding of geo-economics is kept on the track. So we're looking at greater communication, greater globalization with Biden in the seat.
Right. So do you believe that North Korea is willing to agree to a denuclearization deal at any cost?
National security remains paramount no matter which country you go to. So present time, Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang would not be willing to sacrifice its national security or the belief system that they are carrying. I certainly think communication is the way forward. Negotiation table has to open up. People have to communicate so that they're able to understand the other side of the picture. As we've talked before, there are two sides to every coin. So this understanding has to be done. May it be through bilateral, trilateral dialogues, may it be through the United Nations, whatever. The world cannot afford another nuclear, or for that matter, a third world war. So that's my take on it.
All right, Fahad Masood, thank you for your time. Moving on, the UN Atomic Watchdog's chief says an agreement with Iran reached yesterday has solved the most pressing issues between the two. Returning from a trip to Tehran, Rafael Grossi said issues concerning verification and monitoring equipment in Iran have been resolved. He said the agreement was intended to give space for diplomacy so that wider solutions can be reached. Grossi struck the last-minute deal in Tehran before a meeting of agency's board of governors this week. The agreement has led to renewed hopes of fresh talks on a wider deal between Iran and the West. Brazil has reported nearly 300 new COVID-19 deaths and more than 10,000 cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed over 4.6 million lives and infecting over 224 more lives. People so far, more in this report.
The mutating variants of the COVID-19 with deadlier effects are making the fight against pandemic more complicated with every passing day. In Brazil, after over a year of closure, public schools have started to reopen as online studies have been unavailable to students with no internet access. Meanwhile, protests erupted once again in the country's Sao Paulo city to demand the impeachment of Jair Bolsonaro over his handling of the pandemic. The British government has dropped plans to introduce vaccine passports for access into nightclubs and large events in England. In New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has extended Auckland's lockdown to beat the Delta variant. In Australia's New South Wales state, vaccinations rates slowed as first dose coverage neared 80%. This comes as Australia expanded vaccination drive to include around 1 million children aged 12 to 15 after it secured additional supplies.
For those of you who choose not to be vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't expect to do everything that vaccinated people do, even when we hit 80%. And I want to make that very clear. Our strong message today from the public health team, from myself and the New South Wales government, is come forward and get vaccinated. Because all of us fear what will happen to those around us who aren't vaccinated, but also please think about our hospital staff.
In China's Fujian province, the coastal city of Puxun has classified 2 of its communities as high-risk areas following a fresh local outbreak of COVID-19. Meanwhile, South Africa announced 2 eased restrictions, including by shortening a nationwide curfew after a decline in infections.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 67 more people have died of coronavirus over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has reached 26,787. It said the positivity rate surged to 5.62% with nearly 3,000 infections reported overnight. Health officials said over 91,000 cases are still active, of which over 5,300 are critical so far. Coronavirus has infected more than 1.2 million people in the country, while more than 1.09 million have recovered. Pakistan has administered over 67 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to date. In Algeria, 18 people have died and 6 others are injured in a traffic accident in Algeria's province of Nama. The accident occurred when a semi-trailer truck collided with a small-sized passenger bus in Al Mashera district. They said a probe into the source of the accident is underway. In Mali, 5 soldiers have been killed in an ambush by militants in the central region. The military said an unidentified terrorist group ambushed in Messina Circle, an administrative subdivision of Mali's Sigo region. It said the military patrol reacted to the ambush, killing 3 attackers. They added that 5 military vehicles were set on fire, while 3 of the militant vehicles were also destroyed. U.S. President Joe Biden has approved a disaster declaration for California as new blaze forced residents in North to evacuate. The White House said Biden is also visiting Sacramento today to survey the damage from the recent wildfires. It said Biden ordered federal assistance to supplement state, tribal, and local recovery efforts in the areas affected by the Caldor fire. More than 6,800 wildfires have blackened an estimated 1.7 million acres within California this season alone. The fires have stretched available firefighting forces and equipment dangerously thin. The blazes are stoked by extremely hot, dry conditions that are symptomatic of climate change during a summer fire season. In Spain, thousands of people have fled homes in 6 more Andalusian towns and villages. Our military was sent to put out fires raging close to Costa del Sol resort. The wildfire has killed 1 emergency worker since it erupted in the mountainous Sierra Bermeja above Estonia region. Forest Fire Agency's officials said the fire has an unusual power and strength and was advancing in several directions. Huge plumes of smoke rising above the mountains could be seen from miles away. The Environment Ministry said the fire covered more than 6,000 hectares of land. Authorities in Andalusia believe the fire may have been started deliberately. In India, an outbreak of dengue fever is suspected of killing dozens of people in Uttar Pradesh state since the start of September. Authorities have launched a campaign to destroy mosquito breeding grounds. Authorities in the most affected Firozabad district reported 58 deaths. It has raised fears that Uttar Pradesh is in the midst of its worst dengue outbreak in years. Firozabad Chief Medical Officer Dinesh Kumar Premi said 95 health camps have been set across the district to prevent virus spread. They say 3 deaths from dengue were confirmed, and it was being ascertained dengue is responsible for more. Uttar Pradesh reported 42 dengue deaths in 2016, its highest since 2015. Incessant heavy rains in western India led to flooding of Godavari River in Nashik. Water entered some high-level areas, posing problems to locals and pilgrims visiting the city. Temples at river banks and idols were submerged in the water. According to local media, a 45-year-old man is feared to have been swept away in the Vulnerable River in district. The water level at Gangapur Dam almost reached to its capacity, forcing authorities to discharge water. The city received 37.5 millimeters of rainfall on Saturday night. In China, Shanghai has suspended flights, schools, subways and trains as it braces for Typhoon CHANTHU. The storm is expected to bring strong winds and heavy rain to coastal regions. The province of Zhejiang has also issued red alerts for flash floods in 9 districts. Port terminals in Shanghai region have suspended containers import and export services till further notice. Officials forecast say Jiangsu province, Shanghai and Zhejiang may receive up to 280 millimeters of rainfall. The typhoon disrupted transport and caused some power outages in Taiwan over the weekend. Hundreds of pedalboard enthusiasts brightened the waters of Moscow's rolling canal with a flashy masquerade to enjoy last warm days of the autumn. More in this report.
The participants of Moscow's boat festival showed off their costumes for fun and took part in a friendly race. Residents of Moscow showcased their passion for the games despite COVID-19 pandemic in the country.
We are runners, we like to run. Running is sport, running is life. But as Moscow Marathon got cancelled yesterday, we want to support the organizers of Moscow Marathon and show that we stand for it being held. These are our t-shirts from all the marathons we ran, we run and we will run.
Paddleboarding became increasingly popular in central Russia over recent years. Despite no seas nearby, enthusiasts sail on many lakes, rivers and cities' water ponds. Many people like to participate in such activities to lessen the stress during the coronavirus pandemic.
Spain's Ugliest Tomato Award, celebrated every year in northern Tudela, fills local farmers with joy. More about this unique competition in this report.
Dozens of ugly tomatoes competed for this year's award, decided by a popular jury, marking the 14th edition of the competition. The winners, who receive an Iberian ham as a prize, have called it a matter of luck. The competition also includes testing of quality and flavor of normal tomatoes. Participants said they got the ugly tomatoes by luck, while others blamed the failed pollination of bees for the results.
They come out ugly because we have some bees that germinated. They take the pollen from one place to the other, but in this case, something went wrong.
The type of tomato, known as ugly tomato of Tudela, is an old tomato of the Marmande variety that is grown mainly in Navarra region.
We have a vegetable garden, but this year we didn't plant the ugly variety. We have planted other types of tomatoes, but we wanted to come because we come every year, so a friend gave us this tomato.
Some of this variety ends up twisted rather than round and smooth.
Pop star Britney Spears says she is engaged to Iranian-born boyfriend Sam Ashghari. In a video post, Spears showed herself standing next to Ashghari, showing off a shiny ring on her hand. Meanwhile, Ashghari separately posted a photo on social media showing Spears extending the finger with the ring. Ashghari's manager Brandon Cohan also confirmed that the pair were engaged. Ashghari is a personal trainer and an actor who began dating Spears since 2016. In business, European stocks have inched higher as investors continue to weigh up the European Central Bank's latest policy decision and inflation data. Frankfurt's DAX has gained over 0.5%, London's FTSE, the pan-European stocks 600, CAC CAC 40 in Paris and Italy's FTSE MIB have all edged up close to 0.5% as well. Earlier, Asian stock also made modest gains with the exception of Hong Kong's Hang Seng that tumbled over 2%. Lebanon is set to receive over $1.1 billion from International Monetary Fund as it faces one of the deepest depressions in modern history. Lebanon's finance ministry said new allocation of funds reserve currency is comprised of $860 million from 2021 and $275 million from 2009. In a statement, the ministry said the amount would be deposited with Lebanon's central bank. Lebanon is in the throes of a deep financial crisis that has propelled 3/4 of its population into poverty. Now it's time to have a look at the weather situation around the globe. That's all from the news studios for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.